The situation report first. The big problem we faced is still the grand solar minimum, which is an oncoming low point in the 200-year solar cycle, which will cause a wide variety of problems, such as problems with crops, problems with the weather, the cost of heating, all kinds of things. At the same time, supply chain issues are now causing shortages of heart medications, antibiotics, cancer drugs, and probably a lot of other things. I'm seeing shortages in the sense of voids at the health food store where I shop for my supplements. And what this means is that if you are dependent on some kind of medication, you probably want to persuade your doctor to give some extra prescriptions to you so that you can stock up and have what you need in case there is a disruption in the supply of that medication. And here we see the reason why the supply chain problems have gotten worse, which is that the wait time for ships waiting to unload at Los Angeles has gone up to 21 days from, less than 7 days in July. So whatever they're doing to supposedly solve the problem is not working, and it's getting worse. And there have been articles to the effect that apparently they're trying to hide this by just having the ships sit further out at sea, but that doesn't change the actual throughput of the system. And now we're hearing that California is going to cut water to cities and farmland amid a persisting drought. We did have some nice rain a few weeks ago, but that wasn't enough to recover from the drought. And even 2 years ago, they were telling us that this was actually the worst drought in 1,200 years in the Southwest. If you want to learn something about history, you can watch videos about the Bronze Age collapse that occurred about 1,200 years ago. And what this was that prior to 1200 BCE, there were a number of civilizations around the Mediterranean that were doing quite well, thank you, and then it started to fall apart. Archaeologists puzzled over this for quite a period of time, and ultimately some climatologists got involved with this discussion, and what they determined was that this was a result of a 300-year drought that came in several waves, and we've also been told that what we're having in the southwest part of North America is also a mega drought. We've been hearing about food inflation, and of course that's correct, but let's point to one item here, which is beef, which has gone up quite a bit. If you go back to about 2019, we were hearing stories about ranchers culling their herds because they could not get enough hay, and that led to an increase in beef on the market and lower prices, but that didn't last, and now we're up with high prices because the supply of beef and the throughput of the packing plants is not very high. Under normal circumstances, ranchers would start to increase their herds, but because of the drought, they may still not be able to get the hay they want and other grains, and this could lead to not increasing the herds, which could lead to continued high prices for beef. Bitcoin is making the news, and not for good reasons. There has been a significant drop in the price of Bitcoin in the last few days. So I think it's something like 17% of the value. You can see it's gone from almost 70,000 down to about 48,000. That's a big drop. We're not sure what triggered this, possibly Evergrande, but what has happened is that leveraged Bitcoin traders were flushed out of the market very quickly. What we find is that some people have bought Bitcoin with borrowed money with leverage as much as 100 to 1. And that's fine when the price is going up. But when the price of an asset goes down, then your leverage works against you in a very brutal way. And that's what's happening to Bitcoin holders. And the result is that over 300,000 crypto accounts have been liquidated in just a few days. If you're surprised by this, you may want to read a book called Manias, Panics, and Crashes, which has been out there for quite a few years. It's now in the 7th edition, and it traces the history of various asset bubbles such as the South Seas bubble, the tulip bubble, and different sorts of things, which would also include the stock market in the present time, and the real estate bubble that burst a few years ago, and the dot-com bubble. But these are recurring phenomena. People don't seem to learn, or they forget between generations, and the whole thing happens again. At the same time, we are seeing that insiders in companies are dumping their stocks, and this must mean something. I remember back in about 2000 when we started to hear that the insiders of the dot-com companies were selling their stock, and shortly thereafter those stocks fell apart. If you're still in the market, it's very much time to go. So what would you do with your money that you take out of the market? Well, one of the things you should invest in is your skills. Some years ago, I heard a professional boxer, a very successful boxer, say that it's the skills that pay the bills. And this person, of course, was always working on his skills as a boxer. The thing about skills is that they are permanent. You get to keep them for the rest of your life. They are portable. If you have to move for some reason, you take them with you. And they will also increase in value as you use them. And here's an example of skills increasing in value. Because of tightened regulations and other things, the number of H1 people working in the U.S. has declined significantly. And the result of this is that people like me with computer skills are getting like 10 calls a day from recruiters wondering if we're looking for a new job. So if you have the skills and you're available and willing, this is a good time to be a worker in various sorts of things. The garden. At the present time, we have just moved into the waxing phase of the moon, and this is a time when it's good to start planting the above ground crops. Here are some potatoes that I grew in a bucket outside my house. Not a lot of potatoes here, but they were tasty. And the thing is, I've thought about whether or not I should just buy more rice and not grow potatoes. And I'm coming down in favor of growing potatoes because it's always good to have something at least that you've done yourself. And for myself, I know that I need to improve my technique for growing potatoes, and what I need to do is basically put a few inches of soil in the bottom of a bucket, put on my seed potatoes, put on more soil, and then wait for the plants to emerge from that soil and grow up, and then put more soil and more soil as they go, and then I will get a bucket full of potatoes. I have 2 tangerine trees. The one on the left is showing some signs probably of overwatering, so I've cut its water ration. But what I want to point out is that these trees are blossoming, and you see quite a bit of fruit forming on these trees that will be ready in a while. There's one down here that's ripe. What I can tell you about the fruit that comes off these trees is that it is far superior to anything you'll buy in the market. And that's because of the full spectrum nutrition with macronutrients, micronutrients, trace minerals, amino acids, and mycorrhiza that I give to my plants. And here is progress with learning to grow carrots. These are a bunch of carrot seeds that I put in this pot on the 24th of November. They are already emerging. I learned very quickly not to put these on a heated tray, and they seem to be doing much better. I have a good-sized hydroponics setup outside my house, and I've been looking at this particular tray for a while and thinking I would like to improve the way it works. The way it does work is that at the end close to us, there is a pump that pushes the nutrient solution down towards the other end. And I've thought for a while that I would like to improve the efficiency of that activity. So I came up with this idea, which is basically a piece of 3/4 inch PVC with a T on the end that I can put inside this tank in order to push the nutrient solution down towards the far end so that it will mix more completely throughout the tank. And this is the way this pump looks. The pipe just fits on here loosely, and I will use a piece of foam or something at the other end to make sure it stays in position. In terms of my nursery operations, I'm making an improvement. What I've been doing up till now is using these 10-ounce plastic cups to start my plants. And what I've been doing with these is down here using a hot nail to make a hole in the bottom so it will drain. And then I have the labor of making this label and taping it on. I realized that with a paper cup, I can use an awl instead of a hot nail to make some holes in the bottom of the cup, and then I can use a Sharpie or other permanent marker to put the name of the plant and the date that it was planted on the cup. Other solutions. Now, in terms of solutions to the food problem brought on by the drought, here is an example of hydroponics, which I think is the best solution because most of the water consumed by a hydroponic system goes out through the plants. And here you have an example of how that can be done at a larger scale. And what you see here is young plants at the front of the picture, and as you go back you see more mature plants. And this is how people make a continuous system. I read about one producer who basically keeps his baby plants in peat pots or pellets or whatever it is for 30 days and then puts them in the hydroponic system for another 30 days to finish them off. And that is a good way to economize on your system. Now, the next best way for growing plants with water scarcity is to grow them in containers because it keeps the water from leaching into the ground basically. If you have some pots, maybe you want to have a tray in the bottom, or just be careful about how much you put in. Maybe use a moisture meter. On a large scale, a machine can put this plastic mulch in order to conserve the water, and that's a very good idea. Maybe a little bit less green than we would like to be, but it's a reality that we need this large scale production, and they're going to have to do it in spite of water restrictions. And here, of course, is an example of what is not possible anymore in the areas where there is no irrigation water. Now, a few large companies in the ag business may have the money to drill deep wells, but those wells down to 1,500 feet can cost about $500,000, and you just have to keep chasing the water level, so the cost goes up. Systems like this were always very wasteful, and they are just going to stop being useful in California because of the water shortages. So it's been very productive this week because the two articles I talked about in terms of heart damage and vaccines killing people were actually mentioned on the Health Ranger report.